going to get us started with a little bit of an agenda today. So we're going to start out just doing some welcome and acknowledgements. We'll have an opportunity for introductions and some connecting. We'll have a shout out for the new 10 cents a meal grantees. And then we're going to go into overviewing some resources to support seasonal menu planning. Mariel will be sharing about some of our curriculum from a Making Michigan Recipes Work series that was done 2017, but is still relevant in a lot of the resources that are available today. And we're going to spend the bulk of today just having a little bit of a facilitated discussion on challenges and opportunities that you all see with seasonal menu planning. When we were thinking about putting this session together, we wanted to recognize that school meals and serving meals to our children right now is pretty difficult. And a couple of us were passing around a video done on the challenges of the supply chain currently and the difficulty that that's adding to all of your already difficult and really taxing work. So we just want to acknowledge that this workshop, this webinar is happening in the context of a lot of other challenges presenting themselves to school food service directors, and that our goal through these network meetings is to provide support and resources and connections for you all. The hope is not to have you leave here with, an additional laundry list of items to do, but just to provide some opportunities for connecting with other people who are trying to do similar things and maybe struggling with similar things, and maybe just create some opportunities for connection and learning. We'll end with some MFIN updates and an opportunity for you all to share some updates, and then we'll adjourn right at 11. So we've got a quick packed meeting today. Just to get started, we'd love for you all to introduce yourself in the chat. If you can just share your name and your institution and role. And then we'll do just a little seasonal connection now, which is I'm up north, and it very rapidly seemed like it changed from our sunny fall weather to kind of dreary early winter weather. So I'm curious from you all, what is one thing you're looking forward to about the seasonal change? Put my Pollyanna spin on it. So just introduce yourself in the chat, and then Abby, I'll ask for some support in reading those out as we go along.
All right, we've got Tracy Nelson joining us from Jenison and Hudsonville schools, Lori Yelton from MDARD's Produce Safety Unit, Yolanda Massey, Hooked on Books Childcare, Megan Jasasik from Portage Health Foundation. Hi, Megan. Of course, we got Noel. We got Rachel Presley, Regional Planner with the Western UP Planning and Development Region. Teresa Tejada from the National Kidney Foundation of Michigan. She works at SNAP-Ed and is joining today to see how to support some of our school partners that are new 10 cents grantees. Welcome, everybody. Tracy Bird, Food Service Supervisor at Kent County Juvenile Detention. Lorna Parks, House of Joy Childcare. Jamie Malner from Michigan Department of Education, Food Distribution Unit. Elena Burris, MSU Extension. Matt from the Agricultural Preservation. He's a specialist with Kent County. Madeline, Community Nutrition Educator, MSU Extension. Sarah from MSU Extension, Nutrition and Physical Activity, SNAP-Ed. Latoya from Kent County, she's a Community Nutrition
Instructor.
We got Amy, who's retired, been involved with child nutrition in various ways in Grand Rapids. And Carolyn Thomas, consultant with Macomb ISD.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. And so then we'll ask you to answer that connecting question. So what is something that you're looking forward to with the seasonal change? I don't know if nobody answered that because there's nothing they're looking forward to. But yeah, so cold weather slowing down the ticks. Yes, this has been a buggy summer, to say the least. I think I'll add mosquitoes to that list.
We got wearing sweaters.
Yep. Go ahead, Abby.
Sweaters get a lot of plugs. It's a nice thing to put on. Soup, also wonderful. The holidays, warm blankets, not having to mow again. leather boots. Mhm. Yeah, I got to retire my Crocs for the season. Okay, so Madeline says that the color change is just beginning in Macomb County. Beautiful leaves, fireplace, soup. There's a lot of cider and donuts going around. We get that for the season. Thanks, Teresa. Hot cider every chance we get.
It's a good season for cider for sure. Well, thanks. I feel like I have things to look forward to now. Family wedding. Yeah, I was in a workshop earlier where folks were talking about, maybe being able to go to some concerts and some gatherings and some of the enthusiasm that comes with that. So warm beverages warming you up. Lots of shout outs for fall beverages and cider and other warm things. So thanks. I'll keep throwing those in there. You've made me look forward to the fall or to the winter, I think, a little bit more in this change in seasons that can sometimes be a little challenging. So I also want to give a shout out to the 10 cents a meal grantees. I think this is new news since the last time we all gathered together. There are a lot of both returning and new 10 cents a meal grantees. So can I just see if we can hear in the chat anyone, or if you want to open up your mic and introduce yourself for what 10 cents a meal grantees we have in the room. Who's here from 10 cents?
Tracy Bird.
Tracy, welcome. We're excited to have you.
Thank you.
Any other 10 cents in the room, new or returning?
This is Tracy from representing Jenison and Hudsonville, and we are in our second year of the 10 cent.
Awesome. Welcome, Tracy. Hopefully this year presents a little bit more, less unpredictability than last year, but so far the evidence is not, but we're glad to have you. Any other 10 censors? Thought we had a couple more in the registration. Maybe they didn't quite make it. Well, if you're new to this work or if you're returning to this work, hopefully this group provides resources for you, connections. Be sure to check in the chat and find those resource organizations or even just schools in your region that can serve as support for you. We're all here to support your success. And so use us because we get lonely if you don't. So today we're going to talk about seasonal menu planning, and one of the main ways we can celebrate seasonal agriculture is with this annual event that just passed, but we're still celebrating. So I'm curious if folks actually did bring their apples today to be able to celebrate. Yay, we've got some apples in the room. So the Michigan Apple Crunch has been happening for quite a few years now, since before I moved to Michigan. I think 2014 was the first year we had Michigan Apple Crunch activity. So somebody can correct me if that year was earlier. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. We're gonna do a quick group Apple Crunch and take a picture together. So let me expand my screen so I can see everybody and get that screenshot. So the Michigan Apple Crunch I mentioned has been going on for quite a few years. It's a effort to celebrate local agriculture. I know for many schools it's been the introduction to what gets folks accustomed to working with seasonal availability. Michigan is number 3. We just looked it up. I think we might have went down one, but number 3 in apple production. And it's been really wonderful seeing this event grow year after year. We collaborate with the rest of the Great Lakes regions in order to celebrate this event. This year, I believe we had over 1 million crunchers. Mariel, do we have a final number on how many crunchers we've had? I know folks are still registering, so.
Yeah, so the official registration goes through the end of the month. So there's still time to register and crunch, but we will report out that final number. So look for that.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so we can get a giant group of everybody crunching. So if you have your apple, let's see it. When I first heard about this event, I was told that we're supposed to crunch as loud as we possibly can so that like all of your office mates are annoyed and it echoes throughout the building. So we'll have a count off. So 3, 2, 1, crunch. And hopefully You got a crunchy apple. Mine was a Cortland and it was a little bit past crunch, but all right, awesome. Thank you all for participating in the crunch. We've registered this, so our numbers are counted towards it. If you want to throw in your favorite apple variety or what you're crunching into today, Mariel's got a Cortland over there. Was yours crunchier than mine, Mariel? No. For some reason, I stopped at Phillips on my way up north. I thought Cortlands were going to be the crunchy ones, and I always seem to forget what the crunchiest apple is. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague Mariel, who's going to share some of the tools and resources that we have for getting familiarized with seasonality. So let me just share my screen for you, Mariel, and we can get this started.
Yeah, so as we're transitioning, I'll just give a quick shout out. There's a few folks on the call who really helped to make these resources possible. So Garrett Ziegler was one of my partners from MSU Extension in developing these resources, and Amy Konkowski was one of our trainers for pilot testing the material. So I'll give you folks credit, and a number of you also served advisory roles for this project as well. So wanted to just give that quick shout out as we get started. So these are seasonal menu planning resources, but they're also a lot more than that. There's a lot of other great information for farm to institution, using basically how to use farm fresh foods in their whole form, and knife skills, culinary techniques, things like that. So it's a whole suite of resources called Making Michigan Recipes Work. So today we'll just really focus on what's in there that helps with seasonal menu planning, but we will share a full link to the resources so you can check out the whole suite, which also includes some videos and other materials as well. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the printed materials or PDFs that you can download online is specifically focused on seasonality. So this document has information on a bunch of fruits and vegetables that are in Michigan that are common and some less common. And it really is a calendar that's color coded for the entire year to show when stuff is available. And the color coding helps you figure out where that came from in terms of production. So the green color indicates whether that food is grown or can be grown outside in Michigan in a farm field. And if it's in yellow, that indicates whether something can be grown using season extension techniques, like a hoop house or high tunnel. So depending on where you're at and which farms you have access to, you may actually have some foods available all year long because of technology for season extension. So this kind of helps you break that down, and it helps you to know where that food is coming from, whether it's grown outside, whether it's grown in a hoop house. And then the purple actually explains where food can come from storage facilities. So a lot of our fruits and vegetables in Michigan may only be available for a really short period of the season, but they may be able to have some storage capacity. So apples are actually a really great example of a food that you can get pretty much year round in Michigan, even though it's really only getting pulled off those trees this time of year. We have cold storage, climate controlled storage, I should say, available that holds those apples pretty much year round. So you have access to buy Michigan apples anytime throughout the year in Michigan. So that's kind of what that color coding helps you figure out for the different things you're looking for to include in your menus. And this one is just kind of a really handy resource for looking for when you're planning what you want, what you might want to include and what else might be available that time of year. If you need to make a substitution, something's not readily available for some reason, it can really help you kind of plan out what you want and some contingency plans as well. Next slide, please, Abby. So another document in the collection is called Making Michigan Recipes Work from Menu to Tray. And this is a menu and marketing guide. And within this document, there's a lot of information about making substitutions. And what we mean by substitutions is, sometimes with local foods, you may not have something that you were looking to get, but you may be able to get something similar. For example, if you were going to have kale in a recipe and it wasn't available for some reason, you might be able to also use Swiss chard or collard greens or something very similar that's also in season. And so the other thing that this can help you with is if you're planning a cycle menu, you can kind of build in categories of foods. In that way, you can be able to substitute seasonally different things that might be coming into season. So let's say you have a soup on your menu, and those soup ingredients may look different in May than they would in September. And you can kind of make that change within your menu planning without actually having to change out your menu significantly. You kind of have a placeholder for that certain soup, and it's a seasonal soup. So you adjust ingredients as they come into season. Next slide, please. So some of the things we highlight as things that might be easiest to substitute within your menu would be toppings for salads and sandwiches. So if you have a salad bar, you can switch ingredients in and out as they come throughout the year. Same with sandwiches, like in the summertime, you might have zucchini slices or cucumber slices on that sandwich. And then once those sort of fade out a little bit this time of year, using things like tomatoes, some of those things that might be in season in the fall. Roasted vegetables is one of the most versatile things. You can roast so many different types of vegetables. So if you had a placeholder in the menu that was just seasonal roasted vegetables, you can pretty much go year round and put something in there depending on what's available locally. Same with steamed vegetables. A lot of vegetables can be steamed and are really delicious that way as well. And then pizza toppings, a lot of variety in what you could add to a pizza topping depending on what's available. Next slide, please. So also in this guide, it talks a little bit about how to work this within a flexible cycle menu. So kind of using more generic menu descriptions or item descriptions, such as seasonal vegetable, seasonal fruit, seasonal side dish, instead of, having a really descriptive, green beans on the side. You could just say, seasonal green vegetable, for example, and then be able to substitute in and out as things are available throughout the year. Side dishes as well, you can think about even components of dishes like a sauce or different types of salad that you might make during the year. So you could do like a shredded radish salad in the spring. Actually, that's available for a lot of the year, but you might instead swap that out with a shredded carrot salad or something like that. So lots of options to kind of build in flexibility if you're more generic in the naming of your menu items. Next slide, please. And it's also sometimes helpful in the substitution to consider your vegetable subgroups. So your dark green vegetables, red, orange vegetables, beans and peas, starchy vegetables, and other vegetables. So if you're needing to meet those nutrition standards, you can kind of label your category as seasonal dark green vegetable, for example. And then you could substitute any of those items on the list depending on what's available locally at the time. So this is, again, all listed out in this guide for future reference. And I see that Abby has put those links in the chat so that you can check those out as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so another one, which kind of focuses a little bit more on the culinary techniques, but I wanted to highlight this resource in particular because it gives some information and ideas on how you might actually do some preservation and storage on your own if you have time and capacity to do so. It gives you some information about blanching and freezing. So I know that there's some schools out there in Michigan that will buy a whole bunch of corn, for example, when sweet corn is in season, and they'll process it in-house and freeze it to use throughout the school year. So if you have, again, the capacity and the time to do that, you can take advantage of some of those preservation techniques in order to be able to have large quantities of fresh frozen foods to use year round. Next slide, please. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to share is that we do have some recipes that are part of this collection that have some seasonal substitution suggestions. A mouthful there, seasonal substitution suggestions. So one of them is a yogurt parfait in which you could substitute different kinds of fruit. Fruit in Michigan is like one of those notoriously short season items, with the exception of apples. But the other thing is a lot of fruit that's frozen in Michigan. So you could use frozen fruits, you could use dried fruits, like dried cherries, for example. So you don't need to necessarily use fresh fruits in a yogurt parfait. You could use those other frozen and dried options. And there's a lot of different fruits to choose from, depending on the season or what's been preserved by freezing or drying. So it gives you some suggestions within this recipe for different combinations of fruit to try. And then the other one is a roasted fall and winter vegetable medley. And at the end of this recipe, it gives you lots of suggestions for all of the different fun roasted vegetables that you might be able to add in depending on what you have available. So the recipe calls for potatoes and parsnips and carrots. And I think that in the picture we added in some green peppers because we did it in the summertime and those were still available. So you could add in any other kind of roasted vegetables as well. So that's another thing to kind of think about as you're looking at the recipes maybe that you're already using. If there might be some substitution capacity within there to add in, you know, a seasonal fruit or vegetable, depending on the time of year. Next slide, please. So again, all of these resources are available on our website, cultivatemichigan.org, and Abby has kindly put those in the chat for you as well. And also, if you wanted to get some hands-on training in some more of these skills, the course has been actually adopted by the School Nutritional Association of Michigan, and it's part of their statewide training. So if you wanted to take advantage of that in-person training, it's course number 160, and it's under the name Michigan Farm Fresh Skills. So if you go on their website, you can learn more about that and when it might be running in the future. So that is all I have, and thanks for giving me a few minutes to share all those resources.
Hey, Mariel, I've got a quick question from the chat. Just to clarify, is the information about preserves in Getting Creative with Culinary Techniques? We had a question in the chat that said, can you post the preserve slide?
Yep, it is in Getting Creative with Culinary Techniques. Okay. And if you're really into food preservation, MSU Extension has a lot more resources on the subject. So feel free to check out our website or reach out if you're looking for a specific fruit or vegetable preservation technique. We can get that information too.
Thanks, Mariel. Are there any other questions for Mariel about the resources or tools that she shared? Or I'm curious if folks have used these tools or were involved in the creation of these tools. If there's anything you all want to share about how you've seen them be useful or applicable or kind of your favorite tricks from them.
Oh, hi, everybody. As somebody that was involved with that project, so happy to see it still live, Mariel and Garrett. I taught that class with Xavier, which many of you might know, and because it's kind of a two-trainer project. I will just say the schools that went through that process, that took the time to train their staff on how to make those Michigan recipes and elevate their knife skills. It was really an exciting, fun, creative time. So, and that class is still live, and Xavier still is teaching. So that would be maybe something you want to plan out, if not right away, for next year sometime before school starts. We were doing a lot of our trainings in August. Food service directors wanted to gear up their staff for embracing this philosophy of local purchases. So just want to say it was all positive all around.
Thanks, Amy. It's great to have you here and have that firsthand knowledge from it. Any other questions for Mariel before we transition to some of our discussion points? Awesome. So I also did just want to notice there was a question earlier about giving a little bit more of a description on the 10 cents a meal grant. I know we have some folks that are actively involved in the administrative side of 10 cents a meal. But 10 cents a meal is a state-funded grant program to provide a subsidy for meals that serve local food to child nutrition programs. So the application process is done at the start of the school year, or I think this year it might have been with September time, somewhere in there. And schools could apply through the federal nutrition meal program application system in order to receive a subsidy for all the meals that they serve that include local food. Is there anyone on here on the administrative side of things that wants to add any more detail about kind of the timeline of that or logistics of getting involved? I know they started including early childhood programs. I believe it was last year was the first year that early childhood programs were also provided funding through this program, and that this year is the largest year by far. I'll share a link in the chat in a little bit to the 10 cents a meal website, where Abby Palmer, maybe you can throw that link in there. But anyone else who would like to share any more about that program? Go ahead, Yolanda.
You know, I tried to apply for that program. I have a child care, and they told me that I couldn't. And I believe I know I read that they said child cares could apply, and I was told that I couldn't apply.
Okay, Yolanda, if you want to reach out to, I can put my email in the chat afterwards and we can have a chat about that. I'm sorry you were told that. I don't know the specifics of your situation. But I'd love to, we'd be happy to help you figure that out more and see what we can do for you. So.
Abby, this is Lori. Hey, I was
ahead,
at a
Lori.
meeting with the industry, MDE, with the food industry yesterday, and they did say that they will be opening it up applications once again. So that would be something definitely with Wendy Crowley that we could connect her with. If she has questions, she'd probably be the best person. I don't know if anybody's here. I don't know if Jamie or Wendy are on the call, but that's who I would recommend.
Okay, and you said that they are opening it up again this year?
Yeah, they're going to look
For
at some of the
additional
ones that had application concerns of, you know, people that did it before and didn't do it this year because of a lot of the with the supply chain component. And then there's others that just have questions. So I think they're going to look at some of that. So my understanding is, yeah, but the new person on it is Wendy Crowley at MDE or Jamie Melnar. They would know both.
Okay, and Yolanda, I see you put your email in the chat. I'll reach out to you afterwards and we can try and create some of those connections. So for the rest of our time together, we're gonna just have a kind of facilitated conversation about what's going on for you all with seasonal menu planning. So we invite you to share your voices, talk, open up your microphones, ask questions, share your experiences. And the question that and also Sarah Eichberger added some additional context for receiving funding through that MDE. You do have to receive funding through the federal meal program. So if you're a CACFP site, that qualifies. So that is maybe one caveat that might have affected some experiences. But just to get us started, let me share my screen again really quick. So what has been one of your biggest triumphs over the last 3 to 12 months, the last kind of calendar year of school food service with regards to learning about or adapting to Michigan seasonality? So for those of you who are either on the ground working or working with other schools, what have been some of the biggest triumphs that you've either had or seen with regards to learning about and adapting to Michigan seasonality? Anyone want to share? And you can take a And if you feel like you've had no successes or no triumphs, feel free to share that as well. I want to hear from you.
Well, I can speak up from the past. I've been out of the trenches for the last 5 years because I retired from Grand Rapids Public in 2016, but I've been active in different roles with schools. I will say, as far as the seasonality, I think of asparagus because it's something that is best to eat fresh versus frozen. And it's not going to store. And figuring out that timing, placing it on the menu, promoting it with the schools, teachers, children, that was probably my first most challenging seasonal Michigan product I worked with. If you think of asparagus, because it's kind of tricky. You can say, oh, we'll have it in May, but it's not gonna, we're not gonna have it until June. So it was a lot of communication with local farmers, the broadline distributor, and getting the kids really excited about it. So that was the more difficult one, because as far as seasonality, like Mariel said, you can serve a Michigan blueberry year round. It might be dried, frozen, but you can serve those things year round. However, when you can do it fresh and then let kids know, like, hey, you go to a farm market, you might see this in the grocery store, bring it to your community. That's the fun thing about it being seasonal. You look forward to that fresh strawberry in June, strawberry season. We can go picking and strawberry shortcake time. So the seasonality is makes it more exciting. But actually, you can use a lot of Michigan products throughout the whole year, frozen or dried, like Mariel said.
Thanks, Amy. Has anyone else had success in utilizing? Yeah, Matthew, did you want to share something?
No, I don't. I'm not on that end. I work with local farmers. So this is a question for Amy and anyone else. What's that backwards planning? What's that runway to go from making the switch to prepackaged menus to all of a sudden deciding to serve local or fresh or local frozen? I can't imagine it's something that can be done in a single school year. I'd imagine it takes an iterative process over what could be a decade.
Amy, do you want to share? You're muted again, but I don't know if you want to share anything about your process.
I'm sorry. I didn't know if you said Amy or Abby.
Oh.
So how do you can't do your entire menu. I think you hit it spot on. You have to do it over time. Will it take 10 years? Probably not 10, but you start figuring out things slowly. And I think for us in Grand Rapids, it was so large, and we were so dependent on having the product available. And maybe some of the purchasing laws were a little different back in my day. But one of my favorites was meeting up with a soybean farmer who then roasted our soybeans for us. We had fresh Michigan roasted flavored soybeans. You got to get out into these conferences to meet these growers, and the possibilities are endless. I had somebody say, Amy, you tell me how much kale you want and when you want it, and that's what we'll plan our fields for next year. So a lot of your groundwork might be happening now for next year. You're just going to keep growing. But we certainly started out small. I was happy to start out with dry beans just because I guess I like eating beans over meat, and that's one of our crops in Michigan. So, just that pepper, there's a stoplight pepper soup on the Michigan recipes link. That was a winner because, a lot of kids just weren't in favor of those dry beans. So we had to figure out a way for them to like it. And our staff was really happy. The staff got generated with creativity and ideas. They were happy to be using Michigan products. Glad, they might have even known a farmer that wanted to do some local direct distribution.
Thanks, Amy. I also saw Sarah Eichberger comment in the chat about seeing schools have success in starting small, looking at existing menu and finding 1 or 2 Michigan grown products that are kind of already in your menu. And then, building in substitutions and additional things from there. Most of these wins have led to more purchasing. And, what we were sharing about the Michigan Apple Crunch in the start is that there have been a lot of schools throughout the state that have started seasonal menu planning by just learning about one product, apples maybe, and then the opportunities that those farmer connections create from there. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about that, Sarah, or what you've seen.
Hi there. Yeah, it makes me think of apples as kind of the gateway to Michigan products, and I think with a lot of things, it can be really successful when you start small and have a reasonable goal, and kind of just taking a look at your existing menu and finding places where you can simply swap out, a product that is grown and available in Michigan for something that you already menu, and then kind of go from there.
Thanks. Lori Grant, did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand. Oh, you got to unmute yourself first.
There you go. I just had some successes. I recently changed school districts, but in my last school district, I did the vegetable grant and partnered with Crisp Country Acres out of Holland, which offered a ton of variety for seasonal produce. And my biggest success, I think, was introducing it to my staff, because we did roasted vegetables, we did rainbow carrots, we did beets, we did asparagus when it was in season. So, and they produced it all and, had to cook it, and they had to learn how to clean it. And most of them we roasted. And then what we did is we sent a sample of the raw product along, because actually COVID was a blessing for this, because the kids were captives with the teacher eating in the classroom. So we sent a raw sample so that they could, and I sent nutritional information so the teachers could talk about it while they were during lunch. And I even had a high school girl bring in a pot of dirt and plant one of the carrots, and they were growing it in their classroom. So it not only taught my staff, because my staff didn't even know what root vegetables were. And so it taught them, and they got excited to cook it and hear the feedback from the kids, and the teachers loved it. So I'm hoping to bring that here to the district I'm at now, but the east side of the state is a lot harder to find a farmer that does it all. Like Crisp Country Acres did a lot of variety, and they even had frozen blueberries from a farmer. So they partnered with other farmers and they delivered right to my school, where I'm finding struggles on the west side of the state or the east side of the state to find that. I can find apples from one vendor, and I'm connecting with Cherry Capital to get frozen in. So I'm working on that right now. So, and my staff doesn't prep as much or cook from scratch as much here. So I'm trying to change that also. So.
Thanks so much, Lori. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. What school are you at now?
I'm at Lake Fenton.
Okay, great.
Totally different clientele than I was at Lawrence, which was very small. And I was in the kitchen a lot more there than I am here. So, just have to change my thought process and it'll come together. So.
Yeah. So Mariel is asking in the chat if they're apples being kind of one of those gateway foods. Are there any other gateway foods that folks have found? I know Lori shared that roasted vegetables, root vegetables was kind of a gateway maybe in some of that aspect. Are there other seasonal foods that folks have found as their gateway into bringing more in?
I found that, like Amy said, blueberries, because you could get them frozen or fresh all year long. And if you just promote it as from Michigan, that brings a lot of interest. And then also squash, if you can find it chopped up, that's a really good one to put that on the menu or mix it with other vegetables. So.
Thanks. And I will put a plug, we'll share some information at the end about an upcoming webinar that's more focused on local food sourcing, that will share some of the resources associated with actually connecting with farmers. So if that's an area where you're struggling with as well, stay tuned for information about that. And then Amy just shared in the chat, Grand Rapids used frozen Michigan broccoli from Cherry Capital Foods for broccoli cheese soup. So yeah, again, there's once you kind of are able to look at your menu and then expand out, you can start to find sources. Garrett shared a resource for Michigan Farm to Freezer, which is a company who solely works in turning Michigan's bountiful agricultural season into frozen products that are generally in more chopped and ready to use forms and a little bit easier to work with for some, especially those larger schools. So thanks, Lori. Any other thoughts on triumphs about with learning about Michigan seasonality and adapting to seasonality? It's great to hear all these stories. All right, well, not to spin to the negative, but I'm also curious if there have been big challenges in the last 3 to 12 months regarding local sourcing and in Michigan seasonality planning, excuse me. And actually with that, I'll also just go to this last question, which what's been an aspect of seasonality planning that has left you perplexed or prevented you from moving forward? So I'll put those questions in the chat just so we can see each other's faces. But what has been an aspect of seasonal menu planning that's left you perplexed or that's posed a challenge? And maybe if you have any idea of what sources you might or what resources you might need to support that. And it could be one that maybe you had and then overcame, and if you want to share that story with us, but yeah.
I guess I'll go. I haven't found a lot of problems with the produce or the products. I found more problems with paper supplies to serve them in. Yeah. So that's been the challenge this year, just trying to get containers to serve them. Because I try to avoid self-serve just because of everything going on. So we try to cup things up so there's less cross-contamination because of this, our lovely things that are going on in the world today. And so just, I mean, where it used to take me 2 hours to do it or hour and a half to do a grocery order, it's taking almost 2 days just to search and try to find things. So that's been the real challenge. It seems like produce is available when I've talked to farmers the last few days. It's just the other things.
Yeah, I so appreciate you sharing the intersection of all those issues, right? And if finding paper products and finding those other things are taking up so much more of your time, just the lack of time to connect with farmers and to prioritize those spaces. So Matthew, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, a follow-up question to Lori. Lori, is that primarily due to existing supply chain issues because of COVID-19 and everyone else trying to source the same products? Or would self-serve, would single-serve products always be a challenge because the scale isn't there in general?
I believe it's right now just supply chain issues. And I knew that was going to come with the gas prices shooting up and a lot of our plastic and stuff is used, you know, how it's processed, and restaurants are doing more self-serve. So everybody's doing more self-serve. So I think the manufacturers just were not prepared for the surge when we all came back. And manufacturers are having a hard time getting raw products to even produce the products that they're producing. So it's all the way down the line from raw products not available, manufacturers don't get it, then they don't have staff when they do get it to produce it, to get it to us in a timely fashion. And there's also the panic mode where people are ordering twice as much to 4 times as much as they really need because the fear of not getting it. So they're stocking up. So there's a lot of variety of issues coming down the pike. I mean, I've ordered paper supplies off of Staples, off of Amazon, you know, because my regular suppliers are out of stock. So looking from any sources we can. We started doing a little more self-serve just because we don't have the staff to cup it up and we don't have the paper products to put it in. So, but we're doing little, not very much of that, just because I didn't want to come back to school and have an outbreak and then point to the cafeteria as, oh, your food. And so I tried to be a little cautious when we came back to school. So we are doing a little more self-serve where I have staff to actually watch it and keep an eye on it a little better. So, and staffing is a big issue right now. Nobody's even applying for jobs.
Thanks, Lori. I'm curious, I know we have a couple early childhood folks in the room too. Are there any things that you all have experienced that are challenges or things that have perplexed you around seasonal sourcing? Anything that you want the wisdom of the group to kind of think through and talk about? And if other folks want to chime in too as well, that's
I can share one thing that's come up with a partner that I work with in early childcare is the CACFP requirements to have like pretty detailed menu information was a challenge for this particular organization because they felt like they needed to put very specifically, strawberries on the menu, for example. And then if they didn't have strawberries that week because they weren't quite ready yet, they had to serve strawberries. So they had to go source them from their broadline distributor because they were required to serve that as part of the program. So we talked a little bit about, how to workshop that and having a little bit more flexible menu titles or things like that. So, seasonal fruit versus specifically strawberries, and trying to do that in a way that would still meet program requirements. I'm wondering if anyone else has come up against anything like that.
And I think those Making Michigan recipe work guides have a lot of suggestions for preventing challenges like that, for building in some ambiguousness into your menus. You're building in some, categorical menus rather than specific food item menus. So be sure if you're experiencing that to check out that resource as well. Yeah.
Lori might be able to answer this better than me, but as far as that menu language, doesn't the regulation come down to the meal component tool?
Mhm.
It's what you have on the meal component tool, not necessarily the printed menu. You also have production records. So Lori, you following me on this? Because I know you do school meals.
And so what was that? Sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
Well, the language that people are using on their menu. I know somewhere you have to identify what you purchased and served. And I thought the regulation came down to your meal component tool and production records, not necessarily your menu. Although I do know parents want to know what's being served. If someone's allergic to strawberries, they might be sending something different. But and I don't know if Jamie's still on. Is Jamie our only MDE person?
Well, this is Tracy. So that is, you're right. It's not so much. So if you have strawberries on your menu and for some reason strawberries don't come in on your order and you have other fruit that will say you need a cup of fruit, you can provide a cup of fruit. A cup of fruit is a cup of fruit is a cup of fruit, no matter what the fruit is,
right,
as long as you have the cup of fruit. So you don't have to be like I've gone to my menu a couple of times and I go to serve like apples and they already served them. They didn't read the menu and they served them for the snack the night before. So I don't have apples, but I have other fruit. I just need to make it a cup of fruit. You know what I'm saying? So you're right. That's all you need to do is make it a half a cup of fruit or a cup of fruit, whatever it is you need it to be, as long as it's a fruit.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is it might be a school district standard that if you're going to tell our parents you're serving strawberries, you better serve a strawberry no matter what. But as Mariel, I think as far as the regulations go, there has to be room for substitutions. Vegetables are a little trickier because you need to stick to those subgroups. But even within that, you didn't get your butternut squash, your red orange vegetable, well then fine, serve carrots or tomatoes. So
yeah, that's true. As long as I know with CACFP, I know they have to, I think there was now some regulations where they need to let them know ahead of time what they're substituting. but they can substitute for school lunch. You can substitute as long as it meets the requirements. And like you said, if it's a red orange, you got to do red orange. If it's a green, you got to do green, dark green. So you have to substitute your vegetable subgroups for the same thing, but the fruit, it's just a cup of fruit. And I think the early childhood is a little bit more strict where they have to notify the parents or put it out, you know, what they're serving, but they can log it. So you're not really stuck to exactly what's on your menu. Right now, you can't. I mean, I've had parents
Right.
call and about food and complain that on pizza day, they didn't get pizza. Well, they got pizza. It wasn't the pizza that the child was expecting, but it was a form of pizza. You know, it may not have been the round pizza we always serve, but it was a form of pizza. So it's really tough right now. Fruits and vegetables have not been as challenging, but the mainline food has. But you're right, Amy, you, as long as you have it out there on your production records and on your menu and you write the substitution on what you're doing, then you're so far, I haven't had any problems with it in my audits and stuff.
Thanks. Thanks so much for both of your insight. I know Sarah Eichberger is putting some resources in the chat too for tackling those CACFP specific challenges as well. So appreciate that. I hate to cut off such a rich discussion. I'm noticing our time and just want to make sure we share a couple resources with you. But if there are, as we finish up here, if there are thoughts that come to mind about resources or specific areas of support that you need from supporting organizations, please put those in the chat. I'll just do a quick plug here for our Cultivate Michigan Fall Featured Foods. Between 2016 and 2020, we featured foods every season to highlight sourcing options around those, recipe and menu ideas around those. So be sure to, the link is up here. I'm going to put it in the chat as well. For our fall featured foods, which include broccoli, salad greens, celery, potatoes, winter squash, and tomatoes. And that sourcing guide highlights all the seasonal foods we featured throughout the 4 or 5 years that we were doing this project, to help you understand better where you can look for sourcing and some menu ideas as well. So be sure to check those out. And then we only really have 2 upcoming events. 2021 is almost over, and hopefully some of you are finding some downtime at the end of 2021 as well. We have a feedback session on information for sourcing local food on November 4th. Anything that Garrett or Mariel wants to share about about that upcoming event?
Sure, I'll just throw a plug in. So maybe some of you were able to make the 10 cents evaluation call webinar that we did earlier this month. This webinar will kind of build off some of that information that was presented. We're looking for feedback on how we can best utilize that local sourcing information that we've collected through 10 cents program, as well as some of the previous information that we have through the local sourcing guide and the previous featured foods. And just wanting to make sure that we're developing resources that meet the needs of institutional buyers, food service directors, and other supply chain partners. So please come to that meeting and join the discussion and give us lots of great feedback to how we can best serve you.
Great, thanks, Garrett. And as always, you can check our cultivatemichigan.org website for additional event updates. I'm sure there will be more once 2022 kicks off. Does
Hey,
anyone
Abby.
else? Yeah, go ahead.
We've gotten a couple questions
Oh, great.
about where to find the recording after the session. I think those go out by email as follow-up, but I wanted to double check.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll once the recording kind of compresses to my local file, we'll send that out to all people who registered so you can watch that afterwards. So you probably won't get it until I would say tomorrow afternoon, just based on the time it takes for things to, for all of that to happen. So we'll close here. Thank you everybody for joining us for today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. And Lorna and Yolanda, I'll reach out to both of you and try and connect with you on learning more about that 10 cents a meal grant. So thanks so much, and we'll see you in a couple months. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.